A new CBS News poll suggests there's a three-way tie in Iowa, less than a month away from the caucuses. Senator Bernie Sanders, Joe Biden, and Pete Buttigieg are all polling at 23% in the Hawkeye State. Meanwhile, Senator Elizabeth Warren has fallen behind. She comes in at 16% with registered Democrats. Iowa isn't the only early voting state that candidates are focusing on. In New Hampshire, Sanders holds a narrow lead over Biden. Warren's support has dropped significantly there in recent months. For more, let's bring in CBS News 2020 campaign reporters Nicole Sganga and Musadiq Bidar. Nicole joins me from Manchester, New Hampshire, and Musadiq is in Des Moines, Iowa. So, Musadiq, let's start with you. I want to start with Pete Buttigieg. Less than 2 months ago, the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, trailed Sanders and Biden by a few points in Iowa. So how has he and how has his campaign been able to narrow that gap?
Well, a big reason for his surge in Iowa is that his message is resonating with caucus goers. And Mayor Pete Buttigieg, when he first came here early on in the summer, he told a big crowd in Iowa City that he's going to start laying down the foundation to really win the Iowa caucuses. Since then, he's gone everywhere. And this past month alone in December, he was here for 8 days. He held 20 events. The campaign says that at 5 of those 20 events, they had crowds larger than 1,000 people. They said that in the first 11 months of his candidacy, that only happened 4 times. So he is seeing a surge in support at the right time, just as we are creeping towards caucus day. The other interesting number from that CBS News poll is that 65% of Iowa Democrats, the most out of any candidate, said that Pete Buttigieg's policies are just right for the general election. In the meantime, his campaign is preparing for caucus day. They are training leaders, precinct captains, and other volunteers to help get them ready and win support. Their national caucus director, who usually splits his time between Nevada, where they also have a caucus, and Iowa, is going to be focusing here the next couple of weeks, driving around, meeting with volunteers, making sure they have the right resources to compete. And speaking of those resources, Mayor Pete Buttigieg has one of the largest staffs here in Iowa, more than 130 staffers, and as of this week, he has 35 offices across the state. For a little bit of context there, then candidate Barack Obama, who won the Iowa caucuses in 2008, he had 37 offices. This is all an important part of the ground game, and Mayor Pete Buttigieg is taking the time to be here. He's spending the resources, and we'll see if all of this will pay dividends for him on caucus night.
Yeah, hoping that more boots on the ground will mean he continues to surge. Nicole, meantime, Bernie Sanders doing well in Iowa, and he continues to do well in New Hampshire. As we said earlier, he holds a lead over Joe Biden and has seen a pretty significant rise in support from liberal voters since November. So why is Senator Sanders doing so well in the Granite State?
Well, that's exactly right, Laura. He's seen a 13-point bump since November among voters here in New Hampshire who consider themselves to be liberal. He's also seen a 10-point bump since November among another key demographic, and that is younger voters, voters under the age of 45 years old, according to that CBS News battleground tracker. And Senator Sanders has been campaigning from college campus to college campus here in the Granite State, appealing to those younger voters. And when I speak with them, they tell me that his message of universal health care and Medicare for all really resonates with them, and that he is the candidate they feel will deliver that agenda if he makes it to the White House. Another topic that comes up time and time again is, of course, climate change. A lot of voters listing that as their #1 or #2 issue in conversations with me, and saying that Senator Bernie Sanders has the strongest agenda when it comes to climate change. We also know from the senator's campaign himself, Shakir, the campaign manager, told me that this was exactly their plan, that they had encouraged their supporters to go out in the summer and fall months and experience other candidates, other rallies, and then hopefully come home to their campaign. We know that here in 2016, Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders won by over 20 points in the state of New Hampshire, and so hoping to get more of those folks to vote for them. Another key point here in 2016, Senator Bernie Sanders only won by 1 point among registered Democratic voters. But here in New Hampshire, undeclared or independent voters can also choose a Democratic ballot in the primary. And Senator Sanders blew it out of the water with those independent registered voters by a margin of 40%. And so looking to capture some of that attention again. Last thing we should mention is, according to that CBS News battleground tracker, of the senator's supporters here in New Hampshire, half of them say that they have made up their mind and that their heart is set on the senator. Compare that to supporters of former Vice President Joe Biden. Only 15% of those voters say that they've made up their mind.
You know what's so interesting, Nicole, is that Senator Sanders has similar messaging with Elizabeth Warren, but her support from liberals has really dwindled. So can you speak to that?
Yeah, we've seen a 15-point drop among support for Senator Elizabeth Warren in that voter group that identifies as very liberal. And that's in part because voters tell me they're a bit confused on her Medicare for All message. They're a little bit confused about how she's going to pay for it, the health care costs. But obviously, don't count out her campaign. She has a very well-organized ground troops here in the Granite State, and also a number of key endorsements from neighboring Massachusetts, where the senator is from. Representative Ayanna Pressley, a number of folks coming to campaign up here on her behalf, and a number of volunteers from the Bay State. Also today, a key endorsement, Secretary Julian Castro. So we'll see if any of those big names can help give her a boost here in the coming weeks.
Let's head back to Iowa. Musadiq, CBS News polling shows the majority of Democratic voters believe that Joe Biden is the best candidate to beat President Trump. So why do voters believe that there?
Well, one thing that is resonating with supporters of Vice President Biden is his message that will attract moderate voters and Republican-leaning voters. One thing we saw with Vice President Biden during his bus tour in December is he went to small towns, small rural places where you can win some of those disaffected Republicans. And his campaign has been making an effort at doing that. The other thing that Vice President Biden has is that experience that makes people feel calm. They feel that his message can win in the general election. And what's interesting about that number is that no one candidate got near 50%. Vice President Biden, 38% of voters feel that he can beat President Donald Trump in 2020. And there are other candidates that voters are also looking at, but Vice President Biden has made an effort to go after, court some of those voters. When he's not in the state, he's flooding the state with some of his surrogates. This week, he has former Secretary of State John Kerry here. He's got Olympian Michelle Kwan coming to the state. His sister will also be here. And we'll see if that all pays dividends for Vice President Joe Biden.
And big picture here, we know how important delegates and momentum are in these early states. So can you both help us break down how delegate allocation works? So, Musadiq, let's start with you on Iowa.
So Iowa has 49 state delegate equivalents. 41 of those are pledged delegates. The state's 1,600, nearly 1,700 precincts all will contribute towards that overall total. Now, in order for a candidate to win delegates out of those precincts, they need to hit the 15% viability threshold. After the first count, if a candidate does not reach that 15% threshold, then those supporters can realign with another candidate who has already reached that 15% level, or they can try to convince other people to come join their camp, helping them get to that 15%. Or they can go home and call it a night. But at the end of the day, you need to have that 15%. Currently, based on our CBS Battleground Tracker estimate, it looks like Senator Bernie Sanders will walk away with 12 delegates. Vice President Biden and Mayor Pete Buttigieg will each walk away with 11, and Senator Warren with 7. That means there will be 4 tickets out of Iowa. These 4 candidates have consistently polled at the top all cycle. But the big thing out of Iowa is momentum. You can win all these delegates. At the end of the day, you need 1,991 delegates to win the Democratic nomination. So winning a dozen delegates out of Iowa doesn't make a big crack in that. The big thing is winning that momentum to help carry you to the 2nd state in New Hampshire, 3rd in Nevada, and so on down the line to South Carolina and Super Tuesday. So all these candidates are going to be fighting to win that momentum. Winning the delegates as cherry on top.
Absolutely, that momentum, that headline. Nicole, can you give us that same breakdown in New Hampshire?
Well, I absolutely agree with my colleague Musadiq. It's all about momentum in these early states, especially here in New Hampshire, which only has 24 pledged delegates. So, of course, we know the magic number to secure the nomination is 1,991. And some of those big Super Tuesday states is really where folks will rack up those delegates. Looking at California has 416, Texas has 228. But right here in New Hampshire, there is also a 15% threshold for securing delegates. And so what that means is that voters will head to the polls on February 11th. The votes will be counted. And then any candidate who has received more than 15% of that vote qualifies to receive some of those New Hampshire delegates. So according to our latest CBS News Battleground Tracker, Biden and Sanders right now at around 9 delegates, Senator Elizabeth Warren at 6 delegates. Those three have been sort of jostling for the tickets out of New Hampshire, along with former South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg. But a candidate has to receive 15% of the vote or more to get any delegates. So if any of those four or any of the other candidates drop below that, that means they have no delegates out of New Hampshire. So this is a proving ground not only for those front runners, but some of the underdog candidates who have committed to this state. Representative Tulsi Gabbard, who has moved to New Hampshire in recent weeks, Senator Michael Bennet from Colorado, who vowed to host 50 town halls in the remaining 10 weeks up until New Hampshire, and Andrew Yang, who's campaigned here most of any of the candidates. So we'll be looking to see if any of those folks make the threshold as well.
All right. Well, Nicole Sganga and Musadiq Bidar, thank you so much for your reporting.